After another weekend of crappy baseball, it's time to open up the mailbag. We'll work through it all together. Coming up, Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, May 11th, 2026. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patno. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, we'll be opening up the mailbag and answering some of your Mariners questions, starting with this one from Cobbs, who wants to know, care to guess why they pulled a dealing Logan Gilbert after 87 pitches, knowing they're going to a six-man rotation the next time through, and he will have an extra day of rest. Coming up empty on that justification.
Yesterday, I had to watch the game on replay, so I didn't have a reaction to it live when it happened. And I don't think there's... I think just based on what I was watching, how he was really cruising at that point, I probably would have sent him back out there. However, to kind of, I think this is just my hunch of the way Dan was thinking along with it, is that Logan has a tendency to not finish strong in these starts, particularly once he gets over that 80, 85 pitch mark. He tends to let these things get away from him. How many times have we seen Logan throw 6 great innings and then he goes out there for the 7th? Not recently, but then he goes out there for the 7th and he surrenders a 3-run homer and he goes 6 2/3. He does do that kind of a lot. Well, he doesn't go that deep all that often anymore, but you guys get the idea.
It's more so like what happens to him when he gets into the 6th, like last time out against the Braves, where he gives up the 3 solo homers
right
in the 6th. Yeah.
So I think, that's part of it. The other part of it is that, look, I have all 3 of my high leverage guys available today. Like, I'm not going to have that opportunity that often in this stretch until I get Brash back, where I can lay out 3 high leverage guys to get the last 3 innings. And also where they were at in the lineup, Ferrer was going to face a bunch of lefties.
Yeah, he was going to face Murakami. He was going to face Montgomery. Right. So yeah, you got 3-4. Gilbert. So it's either Gilbert facing the middle of the order for the 3rd time, or going to one of the best relievers in all of baseball so far, and Jose Ferrer, and probably your best and most consistent reliever so far, to face their best guys. So I don't really have an issue with that, to be honest with you.
Right. Like I said, I probably would have sent Logan back out there just because he was dealing. But again, from Dan's perspective, you have your 3 best guys. This is the exact time, like in the lineup, where you want to use Ferrer, where he's going to face their most dangerous lefties. You want to use them there. There's no guarantee those guys get up again, by the way. That's might be the last time you see them in that game. And you have Bizzardo fresh, and you have Munoz, who hasn't pitched in, a couple days. I do think it's understandable to be like, with Logan's career struggles in his last inning, particularly after 75 to 85 pitches. After that, things get a little dicey. It's the middle of their order. There's a couple lefties coming up. Like, yeah, let's get Ferrer in there, and then we'll go Bizzardo for the 8th. And if Bizzardo wasn't available yesterday, do I think they push Logan? Maybe they might. But I think with Murakami and Montgomery coming up and just a 1-run lead, I think they decided to play matchup there. Unfortunately, Ferrer didn't really have it, got away with it. Bizzardo didn't have it, didn't get away with it.
Shout out to Cole Young, by the way. Great play there to end the 7th.
So, in a horrific at-bat in the 9th. So, gives and takes, but he's 22 years old and he's playing very well. So we're not here to nitpick Cole Young to death. But it is. I think it was just a relatively explainable move. You know what? Like, again, I get to understand.
I'm fine with the process of it, honestly.
Right.
Given the point in the lineup that they were at, I totally look. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Look, and that's ultimately like. That kind of goes into the larger conversation of like why we criticize Dan, or the things that we criticize Dan over, and the things that maybe we won't criticize Dan over. It's all process related, right? Sometimes the process isn't going to work out, but at least as long as you're employing good process, and in this situation, I think he did, I'm fine with it. As long as you're putting your guys in the best position to succeed. And I think ultimately that's what he did. And just, guys didn't execute.
Yeah.
He has no control over that. But I think, having, Logan get through 6 and then get to that part of the order and then being able to hand the ball off to Ferrer, Bizardo, Munoz, that's typically the recipe for success here. That's going to have to be the recipe for success for this club.
Yeah. There's enough things to really, get on Dan about and the decisions he makes when he actually has good process and results don't follow. That's not something we're going to attack him for or blame him for, because there are going to be plenty of times he's going to push a guy for an extra inning and it's going to blow up in his face, or he's going to go to Hoppy instead of, blah, blah, blah. The process was good. So I'm not losing any sleep over that decision. Again, I probably was out there, but I totally understand why Dan didn't.
I get it. Logan was dealing, and but also I kind of feel like if Logan goes out there and he gives up a couple of solo home runs, we're getting questions about why did they bring Logan out there for the so
it's really a no-win situation for Dan unless the Mariners literally won the game. Then he looks like a genius, but because they didn't, he looks like an idiot, even though he didn't do anything wrong.
They didn't lose that game because of what they did on the pitching side of things. They lost that game because they scored 1 run.
Yep.
For the second game in a row. All right, next question here from Distraught. What do you guys think about the piggyback decision in the rotation? Could this also allow Bryce/Luis to pitch out of the bullpen once a week? Colby, I don't know how you feel now that you've thought about this more, but I really don't get it. This just feels ultimately like, I get going to a 6-man rotation during this stretch when you don't have the off day and all that. Fine. That's totally fine. But I don't get specifically what piggybacking Luis Castillo and Bryce Miller does, other than delay the inevitable and give them an excuse not to make the tough decision that they clearly don't want to make.
Yeah. So going to the 6-man rotation in this stretch where you're playing 14 games in 14 days, I'm fine with it, especially since it's still early in the season. Yeah. But after that, you have to make a definitive decision. That's where I'm at. Like, this is kind of a half measure. It's kind of like the whole thing we talk about. Like, do you want to win? Is that your priority, or is your priority to not upset, established players? Because this right here, I think it actually doesn't accomplish either of those things. It doesn't help them win, and it doesn't help them, maintain some kind of anything in the clubhouse, because it's still a demotion for Luis. Of course it is. Whether he's starting or he's the piggyback to Bryce, it doesn't matter. This is a demotion. He's not the starter. So I think they picked the worst of all the options here. There are no good options, by the way. So it's not like, but the best option is, Luis, you're in the bullpen now. I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be a permanent switch. But for now, you're our worst pitcher. It is not close. You're going to the bullpen. Bryce is going to be the starter. And, this idea of like, well, you piggyback him. It's like, okay, but then you're still a bullpen arm down, because you're not going to use Luis on the off days where he's not piggybacking Bryce, because you want to keep him in the same schedule, I guess. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So my only thought here would be that it's a way to ease Luis into the bullpen role, but we don't even know who would be starting, in this piggyback situation, if it would be Bryce starting or Luis starting and then the other coming out of the bullpen. I guess that makes some sense if they're trying to just ease Luis into that process of coming out of the bullpen. But that, to me, should only last maybe 1-2 turns through the rotation at most, right? Like, at a certain point, he's got to be able to go multiple days in a week out of the bullpen.
Right. I mean, particularly right now where you don't have Brash, you don't have Spire, we don't know when those guys are going to be back. And you're putting that much more strain on, on Munoz and Brash and Ferrer, because they're the high leverage guys. They got to pitch as often as possible until you get these other 2 guys back. So you're just putting more strain on them, because you're going to try and force them into games whenever you have a viable opportunity. And you have one less guy in the middle that you can use during blowouts, because, oh no, we have to save Luis so that he can piggyback with Bryce in 3 days, rather than use him now in a 5-1 game in the 7th. Now we have to go to, Ferrer or Bizardo or whatever when we don't want to. Like, it just, I think this is the worst of both worlds. You weaken your bullpen. You don't improve your rotation really all that much, especially if it's the 4-3 thing that they kind of laid out. Like, oh, Bryce goes 4 and Luis goes 3. Like, why? To what end? What does that accomplish for either of those guys?
Yeah.
And also you're stunting the development of Bryce Miller a little bit here.
Yeah. My hope here is that this is just carefully crafted language to essentially say, hey, we're moving him to the bullpen. This is just us like kind of just easing him into it.
Sure. And look, I don't know the psychology of Luis Castillo, but just speaking for myself, I'd be insulted. Not because I got moved to the bullpen, but because you're trying to be like, oh no, you're not getting demoted. Like, oh no, this is actually good for you. Dude, just tell me the truth. Like, you don't think I'm one of your 5 best starters. You want me to go to the bullpen because you can't DFA me because I'm making too much money. That's fine. Like, I will go to the bullpen. I will be a good soldier. I will work on things. And if I'm needed again, I'm ready to assume that role. But this whole like massaging Luis's ego, like I get it. I love Luis Castillo. I said on Twitter the other day, if he was a religion, I'd convert. I love that guy. But he's bad right now. He sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no nice way. He sucks right now.
Yeah.
Could he be good
he
again?
does.
Yeah, of course he could. Is he right now? No, he's your worst pitcher, worst starter, at least. And this idea that we're going to, keep him in the rotation just to kind of, ease him into blah, blah. It's like, dude, just rip off the Band-Aid. You know what's coming. You know what you have to do. And it just seems like you don't want to do it. And again, it's another point in the cap. Do you want to win? Or do you want to massage the ego of some of your veterans? They moved Cal down only to 4. Randy's still hitting behind him, but they weren't willing to pull that trigger with Luis. It seems like the way out.
And again, this was a big reason why we were like, we don't know if Emerson Hancock is going to stick in the rotation. And this is why we talk so much about Hancock going to the bullpen and all this, because like, at the very least, they have come to the realization that that was not an option. That doing something about Hancock was just simply not an option. It was not a justifiable lever for them to pull.
Sure,
but still, like clearly, they don't want to make this decision. All right, we'll answer more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by Gametime. MLB season is back and you can feel it. I'm talking fresh starts, big expectations, and that first crack of the bat. Whether it's a breakout rookie or a division race that goes down to the wire, there's nothing like being in the ballpark for it. The only problem, getting tickets can feel like a grind. Long queues, surprise fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's where Gametime comes in. The Gametime app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. It's simple to use, and the Gametime guarantee means you get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. And here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see. So what you see is what you pay, period. And whenever the Mariners are in town, or if I just want to catch a ball game in Toronto, Gametime is my personal go-to. 2 taps and it's done. No stress, no hidden fees, just great seats and minutes. That's what makes it so easy to decide last minute to hit a game. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with me and other listeners of this show. Tap the link in the description or go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com to learn more. Our next question here on Mailbag Monday comes from Puget Parvey, who wants to know, how long of a leash does Rob Refsnyder have, given the righty platoon history with this franchise? All right, so look, 2 things. First and foremost, I recognize that this is not good process on my end, what I'm about to say. Secondly, I acknowledge that Rob Refsnyder is not the same person as AJ Pollock and Donovan Solano, that they're not the same player, that their situations all differ from one another. I acknowledge that. That said, though, after you've seen this very similar story play out multiple times over the last half decade, you start to learn when the writing is on the wall. And frankly, I think the writing is on the wall with Rob Refsnyder. Would love to be proven wrong, and he'll have plenty of time to prove me wrong. To answer your question, I don't know exactly when the cutoff date is for the Mariners, but my guess is it's a while down the road, just given how they've operated. And again, maybe he turns around over the next couple of weeks and makes me look like a fool, and that would be great. But I think he might be cooked. And it's especially hard to watch right now when you have Connor Joe, who's actually producing at an above league average clip right now in essentially the same role, as well as Brennan Davis just crushing it down in Tacoma. So you actually have options now if you want to move on from Refsnyder, which maybe in the past, maybe with some of these other guys, you didn't necessarily have other options, at least this early on into the whole thing. So yeah, I know like I'm probably giving up a little too early here. But also the thing that we need to recognize here is like, how many at-bats did Rob Refsnyder have last year when he was crushing it, when he was one of the best right-handed hitters in all of baseball? Like 150 to 200 with the Red Sox, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're at what, 50 or so right now? So we're at least probably a quarter through that, if not a third. Like, I get it's a fairly small sample size, but for Rob Refsnyder specifically, it really isn't. And that's kind of just what comes with the territory.
I mean, proportionally, it's about the same sample size as Cal Raleigh. Like, either way you want to slice it, we're about a quarter of the way through whatever their respective sample sizes are. So, yeah, I think the bigger problem with Rob is that there's nothing else he provides. Like, he's not a good defender. He's not a good base runner. He doesn't have positional flexibility. He's not mediocre against righties, so you can use him against righties. His only job is to crush left-handed pitching. And if he can't do that, then he's dead weight. Like, he provides absolutely no value whatsoever to this roster if he's not hitting lefties. So, again, unlike in the past, maybe the Pollocks and the Solanos, like those type of guys, the Mariners have like actual replacements that they can go to here that would provide basically the same exact thing as what they were hoping Refsnyder would, like Connor Joe. Now, he's not going to be as elite against lefties as Refsnyder used to be, but he's better against them now. And he can actually hit righties a little bit. Like, he's fine against righties. He's usable against righties, which Refsnyder isn't. The positional versatility, it's about the same. It's about the same. They're both corner outfield only. And even then, I guess Joe can at least play some first base too. And then obviously there's Davis, who's just tearing it up down in AAA as well. So Refsnyder's not going anywhere anytime soon. Like, it's not going to happen in the next week or two, but I think the earliest I could see them realistically moving on is about a month from now. Because again, they're writing him that check, whether he's here or not. And I think that they are going to want to try and get something out of that. And again, that's, partly ownership, partly it's the Mariners and the front office not wanting to give up on a guy after 50 plate appearances. And then having it look bad and blah, 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 all those reasons. But yeah, I don't think it's anytime soon. I also don't think the Pollock and the Solano weighs into their decision at all. I think they're smart to take this on a case by case basis. And I just don't think they're going to be willing to make that call for another 4 to 6 weeks, give or take. But remember, I'm pretty sure Pollock was on this roster until late July. Solano made it past the All-Star break until they acquired, Naylor. So I don't think it's going to be that long. I don't think Refsnyder is likely to survive if he continues at the pace he's on. I don't think he's likely to survive past June, to be honest with you. But one thing they can do in the meantime, he can't hit leadoff. Nope. Sorry. If you're going to figure it out against lefties, you can figure it out hitting 7th for a while. But you cannot stack your 2 worst hitters right now, which are Refsnyder and Raleigh. Raleigh. Although Raleigh can't hit lefties either. But Refsnyder and Raleigh cannot be 1 and 2 against left-handed pitching. You're just giving yourself no opportunity. And by the way, Leo Rivas hit 9th the other day. So you stacked your 3 worst hitters all back to back to back. 2 of those 3 hitters in the most important spots in the entire lineup. So yeah, you can't continue to hit leadoff. If you figure it out, great. We can move you back into leadoff spot. But for now, you have to hit 7th or 8th against lefties until you can figure it out. And if you don't figure it out in the next, month, which for Refsnyder is probably like what? 35 plate appearances, 40 plate appearances at most. Like, if you can't figure it out then at that point we have to have a real conversation, because Connor Joe is just flat out better than him right now. And honestly, Brennan Davis literally can't be worse. So there are options, which wasn't really the case when Pollock and Solano were here and they hung onto their roster spots for a long time.
All right, I picked this one for you, Colby.
Mhm.
Troy wants to know, what movie speech or monologue would you use to fire up the squad, the boys, if you will? Bonus points for being non-sports related, i.e. the Bill Pullman speech from Independence Day.
Don't know how that one really applies. Great speech though. And obviously there are like the classics. There's Any Given Sunday. You know, the classic halftime speech there. There's Miracle. Great halftime speech in that movie. And there's also great television shows you could turn to for this. There's Ted Lasso, if you want to be a little bit more inspirational and like, you know, you could be a goldfish and all that. That's a great one after they get relegated. That's a fantastic one for this situation. There's Friday Night Lights. Nobody delivers a speech like Coach Eric Taylor. But in times like this, I'd like to go to a 30-second clip from an episode of King of the Hill, season 6, episode 20, towards the end, Dang Old Love, where Bill Dauterive, of all people, gives one of the best inspirational speeches in the history of television. So that would be my pick. And it's really only applicable for about the first 30 seconds. And then the next minute is like, if you kind of remix it a little bit, you can get to that message. But like the heart of the message is really good. But again, yeah, like there's lots of Ted Lasso. You know, there are a lot of great speeches, but again, they kind of have to apply to where the Mariners are right now. And I actually find television is a better place to get those speeches than movies, because the movies are a little bit like over, especially non-sports movie speeches. Like they don't really apply all that well. You're like A Few Good Men. Like, how is that monologue going to apply to? I mean, it's not really a monologue, but you know what I mean. Like,
right?
It's just television. Ted Lasso, great. Friday Night Lights, great. Shoresy, that one we definitely can't air on here because we would get big trouble for that. But if you're not watching Shoresy, you're missing out. But yeah, King of the Hill, season 6, episode 20, Dang Old Love.
Well, we will answer more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Longtime Mariners podcast is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. If you've got a sweet tooth like I do, then you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why the Confetti Craze 5 Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. This is that classic taste you remember, but with a tasty caffeine boost and zero sugar. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I've always loved birthday cake, but I'm turning 30 this year, so I can't be eating sweets all day. And this is a perfect alternative. Confetti Craze 5 Hour Energy Shots taste just like birthday cake, vanilla and buttery flavors to let you be unapologetically extra and unstoppably energized. The Funfetti flavor is back on 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. So crack open a Confetti Craze 5 Hour Energy Shot today. All you can do is let it hit you and then hope you can find your legs. And you're listening to the Longtime Mariners podcast, part of the Longtime Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. Shout out to King of the Hill. Transactional Healing wants to know, the mediocrity of this team hurts my brain, and most days this lineup looks absolutely lifeless. When does Cal start hitting in the bottom third of the lineup? When does Randy start DHing full time? When does Emerson get the promotion and push Donovan to left field? Well, 2 and 3 are kind of connected, really.
Yeah.
And 2 and 3 aren't going to happen until Colt Emerson starts producing consistently. Now, he started to hit better over the last few games. So hopefully that's the start of it. And maybe by the end of this month, we're actually talking about like, hey, this could be happening. So
He also played third base the other day.
Yeah.
Not 2 days in a row. So
I checked yesterday's lineup for that specifically, and he was back to shortstop with Patrick Wisdom over at third. Still though.
Yeah.
2, and then the first half of 3 is not going to happen until Emerson starts to consistently hit.
Even then, Randy won't DH every single day. Maybe he starts to DH some, but they're going to want to use the DH for Rayleigh and obviously Cal,
Donovan
and
a little
Canzone,
bit.
Donovan a little bit. Like, yeah, they could start to actually cycle guys through.
Yeah.
And also part of that is weirdly enough, connected to Victor Robles.
But here's what's also connected to that: Luke Raley and Dominic Canzone, and where we're ultimately heading with this thing, that Raley and Canzone likely cannot coexist on this roster.
And also connected to that is Rob Refsnyder. If you don't have a platoon partner for both of those guys, doesn't Canzone just have to play every day at some point? Like, yeah. See how they're all connected?
Yeah.
They're going through a long tunnel. So go watch the clip, guys. Ty will definitely put a link to it in the description. I nailed it. Again, it gets off the rails in the last 30 seconds, but remix it in your head. It'll work.
Sure.
Yeah, they're all connected in a weird way. Like, and again, like Donovan, or rather Emerson allows you to move Donovan. Donovan allows you the flexibility to move other players, not just Randy. But I think in theory, Donovan would then get most of his playing time in the outfield, coming at second base coming into the game at second base, third base occasionally, but mostly in left field and right field. And then whoever he's playing for that day probably DHs. And that'll be Randy a good chunk of the time, but Cal's still going to need DH days. Once they get Robles back, they can finally maybe give Julio a DH day or two because he needs it. Obviously, Canzone is still going to factor into that DH spot. And for a while, they're going to want to give. Honestly, the move for Emerson down the road, like when they finally make that move, it might be just Refsnyder and being like, okay, bye. Like you're gone. So yeah, they're all kind of connected, but the one thing I can't see is I don't see them ever hitting Cal 7th, 8th, or 9th.
No. Here's the other question though. Donovan's obviously back now. He's able to play in the field and hit and all that and run the bases, but with this, groin hip thing that he's been dealing with, can he play the outfield with any sort of consistency right now?
Donovan? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe he becomes the DH.
Yeah, it's worth wondering.
Yeah,
but that complicates things even more if he can't play in the outfield with any sort of consistency.
Right, because you're not taking Cole Young out of this thing. Again, we know they're not going to take JP out of this thing. So at that point, Donovan has to play DH if he can't play the outfield, because you're not taking Donovan out of the lineup either.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see how it all works out, but I do think those last two parts are connected essentially at the hip, and then Cal's never hitting 7, 8, or 9. Not this year.
No.
Maybe as low as 6th.
Noah wants to know, obviously the Mariners have their hands full with starting pitcher decisions related to Miller, Castillo, Hancock, but Cade Anderson's start is hard to ignore. Barring injury, he probably wouldn't crack the rotation this year, but what do you expect his role to be, and when will he get the call?
Cade will probably be a multi-inning reliever out of the bullpen sometime late summer. Again, and the whole you can't predict injury. It's like, no, not specifically, but can we assume there's going to be an injury to some Mariner starter at some point this year? Yeah, it's probably a pretty safe bet that happens, and we'll see how Luis is pitching out of the bullpen, hopefully, at that time, because that might just be the answer. But ultimately, I think Cade probably makes his debut this year as a multi-inning reliever out of the bullpen.
Yeah, agreed. And that won't be for a while.
August. Post-deadline at the earliest.
Yeah, post-deadline probably, because at that point you can kind of assess where your bullpen is at and just where things stand, and how he better fits into the overall picture. So
Plus by then the innings cap probably be getting pretty close, and they'll have to make a decision either way anyways.
That is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And once again, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.